my experience with an arthrodesis or ankle fusion operation. As you saw with, or those who did see the first two bits that I did on it, the production was pretty poor because I had a very old camcorder, and so I've gone and bought a new one, and I'm set up here in the shed, which provides a much better lighting situation. And so look, what I wanted to say, that it's now 10 months since my operation. I'm sorry that I didn't get to this more quickly. Quite a bit's happened. I was in the process when last speaking of the formal rehabilitation program, which I would recommend as being a very good idea, and I would point up that it's not always something that happens automatically. You sometimes do have to press for this to happen. I had a program that went over probably 2.5 to 3 months, and 2 sessions a week in both the gym and the pool, which particularly the pool I found to be very good in sort of enabling you to have the pressure off because of the buoyancy on your ankle, and to do exercises in a way that allowed you to gradually put the pressure back in a way that best suits you, with all the steps and other exercises that the specialist will take you through in that program. Because I have for a long time, as part of general health and well-being, done a gym program, I was quite happy to have an hour session in the gym, followed by the hour in the pool, and I was doing that twice a week. The gym sessions I was quite comfortable and used to. One of the a couple of big things that I would point out with a rehab program, it's very much about your attitude and approach to this that will determine the degree of success and benefit that you get out of the program. You do have to enter into it with a determination that you want to progress, follow the instructions and make things work. It's a bit of a social environment, because you see a lot of people with all sorts of issues facing similar sorts of situation to you, and it's natural to get chatting, and you've got to be sure that that doesn't happen too much. The other thing that I found is that when you think that everybody who is at or in a rehab program, you're all in the same boat. Some less difficult situations than yours, some extraordinarily more difficult problems being faced than your own. And this, I think, is really good to see that no matter what your situation is, there's probably always someone worse off, and that can be, quite an incentive in the way that you approach your own rehabilitation program. One of the other aspects in rehabilitating your ankle that I found was the footwear that you have and use. We live out on a property, and during the warmer months I'd be often out and about, sometimes in bare feet. Certainly more often than not I would wear sandals, otherwise sports shoes, and particularly heavy footwear, boots and so on, work boots. But I found that the footwear that you chose to use. For example, the sandals really probably are not going to be a proposition for me with the arthrodesis, the ankle fusion. I think you're going to need something, you know, with more support. I found in trying the sandals that I got a fair bit of soreness in the ankle, whereas the well supported boots or shoes make all the difference in the world. I'll show a little bit of what I've done with the footwear. One of the big decisions that I made was to actually see a footwear specialist or an orthotist, somebody who makes a special orthotic insert into your shoe that will that is tailor-made, custom-made for your foot and for the situation you're facing with a frozen ankle. And the process is very interesting, takes some time, and it's not cheap. You don't finish up with much change out of $400, but you do finish up with a very solid and personalised pair of orthotics that you fit into most of your footwear, and that these will stabilise the foot, and particularly I think are designed to take some of the pressure off the forefoot, which becomes so very important to somebody who has had an ankle fusion. In my case, the incident or accident that led to me ultimately requiring an ankle fusion was a fairly serious parachuting accident which had occurred 30 years ago. And as a result, whilst I thought that the repair and the pinning of the ankle to fix it meant that I had only, you know, not much restriction on my movement, actually when I looked at things closely, I realised that in fact I pretty much had a fused ankle, and we're only sort of talking about degree. And the impact of this is that when you have an ankle fusion, as anyone who does will find out, the pressure, because your ankle is locked at the talus, will move to the forefoot. And whilst, you know, you can get used to that, you're going to have a change on the pressure of where on the pressure in your foot. And for me, that had happened to 30 years, so I probably don't expect to get as good an outcome as maybe somebody whose foot has been otherwise okay prior to them having a fusion. I just wanted to mention a little bit on the technical side, which I would suggest you should talk about with your surgeon before the operation. I'll show some of the x-rays taken of my ankle after the fusion, and as you'll know, the two main bones are the tibia and the fibula, being the one that goes down the side. And what happens, I think, in most arthrodesis or fusion operations, is that the bottom part of the fibula is actually cut, and it can be part of the fusing with one of the screws passing through the little piece that has been cut off down the bottom. I'll show this in an x-ray, and that's mainly, I think, to give you know, sort of so that you if you've got that coming down here, it can lock and you don't get the movement, and so they release that so that you get a bit of the lateral movement that way. But one of the things that can happen, and I think is happening with me, is that the piece that's been cut can in fact grow back onto the main part of the bone right coming down your leg, and and even if that doesn't happen, because you've got that piece down there, it can impact on the comfort of your footwear. So that's a bit of probably not very well explained, but I just sort of would probably talk with the surgeon about that and what the options might be. The other thing that my surgeon talked about is that they sometimes, what they nicely call is release the very important Achilles tendon, which means that, you know, they cut it to help with your movement. You can talk to your surgeon about that. I expressed the wish and ask that it's apparently not something that you can absolutely say until you get in there. I might be wrong, but because I had a serious injury exactly 30 years ago prior to the operation in a parachuting accident, and I had thought when it was repaired that my foot was still, you know, reasonably sort of flexible, you know, but I sort of found when I looked at it closely before the operation that it was probably pretty much fused at the time. So the impact of this has been that for 30 years I have been putting a lot of pressure on my forefoot, and those of you who have an arthrodesis or ankle fusion, that's what you're going to be introduced to, because your ankle is locked in place at the upper part, and most of the pressure will transfer down to your forefoot. And for me, that had already happened for a long time, and so I was probably a bit disadvantaged in that context, and that's why I started to look very closely at the footwear. We live out on a property, and I spend a good deal of time outside, and a lot of jobs, handyman work and stuff like that, and here of course in the shed. And during the summer, a lot of the time in bare feet, even around here, certainly sandals, and then otherwise sports and ordinary shoes, and of course a big part in the boots. You've seen, if you looked at my second video, you'll see the boots that I'd had for a long time. A very faithful pair of mongrel boots. Well, I'm pleased to report, and I'll show you, that I bought some new mongrels. In fact, my wife and I both bought a pair of exactly the same model of the, so we've got the his and her mongrel boots, and I've once again personally found them to be a good fit for, I've got a reasonably broad foot, and so they're something that is working well for me, and I do spend a lot of time because it gives support to the rest of the ankle. Another thing that I've done in focusing on the footwear is that I've decided to see a specialist orthotist. I had used a standard orthotic in my footwear over quite some years, but this is taking the whole thing to another level in having a custom-made full foot orthotic for the footwear. And the second thing I was looking at was investigating a rocker type sole in the shoe, and in fact I had a very good set of Merrill sports shoe, had the sole completely removed and a slight convex sole put on it, and I've had limited success with that. The orthotics don't fit in the shoe in a way that's comfortable, and I'm still trying to work out whether the rocker and the slight change in the basically the thickness of the sole, because when you do have an ankle fusion you lose a bit of length in your shoe because you're having a fair bit of cartilage and that sort of thing removed, and so we sort of made a slight adjustment, but I'm still trying to work out whether or not I've got a slight limp with it. But I do, I'd recommend to anybody the idea of thinking about seeing an orthotist, and whether that might be something that will be good for you. Right, what I'm wanting to do now is to show you the amount of flexion that you have in your ankle after an arthrodesis. This is my, in inverted commas, normal ankle, and this shows you the amount of flex that I've got in it, and that way, like that. And this is the ankle that's had the arthrodesis, and you can see here that it's absolutely rock solid. There's can't move. When you try and move it, actually all you're doing is moving your toes, and you can only What I wanted to do is just finally quickly run through some of the issues about footwear. I've got a range of shoes here that I'll go. This was a general pair of shoes, and this is the sort of insert that I've had for quite some years, that I would use in this set of shoes. However, I've since had made for since I've had the operation a fully customised orthotic, which is exactly like this. And a pair of these, as I mentioned, you're looking at somewhere in the vicinity, with the whole process, of about $400. So it's important to understand with the orthotic that the reason it's been designed this way, and you'll see quite the lump that's in the middle there, and that is to provide solid support in your midfoot, because that's where all the pressure is going down. You can't flex the ankle, and you need the support here, and also you'll find a lot of pressure comes down on this part of the foot as well. So it's important to have a good solid support here, this way provided through the orthotic, but you might just find shoes generally that work that way for you. The other thing I want to point out with this was a good pair of Merrills. They had quite a crunchy sole on them, but this has also been replaced by the orthotist here, and what we were attempting to do was to get almost this rocker motion that takes the pressure off the forefoot. Now, I'm still working with this. I'm not sure how happy or how well it works. It's 11 months out, and it's probably a bit interesting to find that I'm still experimenting with the various footwear. I used to wear sandals quite a bit, but they're fairly much out of it. But you are, I think, going to need to experiment with the footwear that you choose and that works best for you after you've had the ankle fusion. Assistance, giving one person's view and experience of it. I guess I'm now going on to bigger and better things, in that for about 5 years now I've been recognised and diagnosed as having spinal stenosis in the back, which is basically the squeezing of the nerves that break if in the lower part, in the lumbar part of your spinal column. It changes from being like a cord, and they split off into the nerves that go down either side of the legs. And the impact of stenosis is that you're essentially getting the nerves are compressed, and in my experience it's been a bit like a cross between a cramp and getting spasms in the leg, and also, you know, over time, you know, slowly bending forward to take the pressure off. And so finally now I've got to the point where I need to have an operation to hopefully release the pressure on those nerves. So, you know, not something that I was looking forward to, especially having already had a pretty important operation less than a year ago. But I guess that's the price we pay for ageing.